In my previous life, Sebastian introduced a young woman and announced that she would replace me as director. Raising an eyebrow, I asked, Sebastian, she just graduated from college. Are you sure about this? He seemed to reconsider and told her to start from the bottom instead. Later, during a business trip, the young woman became intoxicated by the wealthiest man in the city and lost her innocence. Afterward, she resembled a caged bird. Sebastian glared at me, full of resentment, and accused, "Did you orchestrate this on purpose?" Seeking vengeance, Sebastian orchestrated my own downfall. He arranged for me to be intoxicated and subjected me to cruel humiliation, all to make me endure the pain she had suffered. I was reborn at the moment Sebastian barged into the conference room. This time, instead of challenging him, I smiled and said, "Fine, I'll resign." Calmly, I left my position, waiting for the Sebastian family's inevitable downfall. I died in an abandoned building, surrounded by silence, a location handpicked by Sebastian. That morning, after a meeting, he mentioned that a distributor was unhappy with our products and wanted to meet me. My secretary was unavailable due to another meeting, so I went alone. On the way, a nail punctured my car tire, forcing me to stop. As I checked the damage, hooligans dragged me into the abandoned structure and forced me to drink cheap, pungent liquor. Amid the chaos, I heard fabric tearing, and soon I was being torn apart. President Sebastian said we could do whatever we wanted. One of them sneered. The agony was suffocating, but worse still was hearing Sebastian's name. Piecing everything together, the location, the meeting, the punctured tire, I realized that none of it was a coincidence. It was all part of Sebastian's plan. For over 8 years, I had worked tirelessly for the Sebastian family, devoting myself to building half of their business empire. Sebastian and I had grown up together, and even when we disagreed, I always conceded. He had no reason to feel wronged by me, unless it was because of Lillian. On the day Lillian resigned, Sebastian stormed into my office, drunk, and overturned my desk, destroying the results of an entire night's work. "Aurora, if not for you, Lillian wouldn't be in this state. She's innocent, and it's all your fault," he shouted. I didn't understand how he could call her innocent, but reasoning with a drunk was futile. Grabbing my car keys, I tried to leave. "President Sebastian, you're drunk. Go home and rest," I said, attempting to calm him. Instead, he shoved me to the ground. "Did you deliberately send Lillian on that business trip?" he accused. That night, his shove caused me to break my coccyx, leaving me bedridden for 2 months. Every rainy day brought unbearable pain, a constant reminder of the events. Around the same time, rumors circulated that Lillian was pregnant. The pieces began to fall into place. "Director Aurora, what's your opinion?" Suddenly, the smell of sweat and alcohol vanished, replaced by the rich aroma of coffee. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive conference room, warming me as I sat at the table. I realized I had returned to the day Sebastian intended to bring Lillian into the company. Sebastian, leaning on the table with determination, assured me, "Aurora, don't worry. Your salary won't be affected, and the team will still report to you. Lillian is just an addition." Before I could respond, old Zhang, a senior member of the finance department, interjected. "Sebastian, do you even hear yourself? What nonsense is this?" he said, his face flushed with anger. Typically a peacemaker, old Zhang rarely raised his voice, but Sebastian's proposal was outrageous. Lillian, an orphan Sebastian had sponsored for years, had just graduated and lacked any experience. Using my position as a stepping stone for her was an insult. People would ridicule both of us, me for being displaced and Sebastian for being blinded by his infatuation. When Lillian couldn't find a job after graduation, she had gone to Sebastian's house in tears. That single visit secured her a high-ranking position in his family's business. Meanwhile, I had spent 8 years climbing the ladder through relentless effort. Now, Sebastian was calmly asking me to step aside. If Aurora doesn't have any objections, in my previous life, I had raised my eyebrows and questioned Sebastian. "Are you sure about this? She just graduated." My objection had led to collective resistance from the executive team, forcing Sebastian to back down. But this time, after enduring the horrors of my past life, I had no desire to fight for a system that would betray me. Under everyone's watchful eyes, I smiled graciously. "All right, President Sebastian," I said. Sebastian, caught off guard, smiled smugly, mistaking my compliance for submission. Before he could revel in his perceived victory, I added, "I formally resign, effective immediately. I have 10 days of unused leave this year, so my last day will be Friday." Before I could finish, Sebastian slammed his hand on the table, his anger palpable. In the past, I would have apologized and backed down, willing to sacrifice my dignity to keep the peace. But today, I chose to break free. "President Sebastian, I'll send my resignation letter to HR shortly," I said politely before leaving the room. Sebastian's face darkened, his fury evident. As I walked out, I thought of the years we had spent together. As children, I had been brought from an orphanage to live with his family. Initially, Sebastian ignored me, but as we grew older, his attitude softened. He began waiting for me before school and occasionally asked me to join him for meals. Once, a group of boys mocked me, calling me Sebastian's child bride. That day, Sebastian found me and punched one of the boys until he was on his knees, bloodied and begging for mercy. His father, furious, spent a fortune settling the matter and punished Sebastian by confining him at home. During that summer, I brought Sebastian his meals, only for him to snap, "Aurora, do you think you're some servant? Don't do these things anymore." From that day on, I stopped bringing him food, but he began seeking me out. Knocking on my door late at night, he would sheepishly ask for my help with schoolwork. Despite his temper, I patiently taught him, grateful to the family that had saved me from hardship. Now, standing in the executive conference room as a woman who had rebuilt her life, I realized that history would not repeat itself. This time, I would take control of my fate. I thought to myself how wonderful Sebastian and his father were, and resolved to dedicate my entire life to repaying their kindness. So, even before graduating, I began interning with the Sebastian family. I worked harder than anyone else, never imagining that one day I would be expected to repay that kindness with my own life. As I opened the conference room door, I was greeted by Lillian, a slender and delicate figure in a modest white gauze dress. Though the fabric was inexpensive, on her it exuded the aura of a fragile flower down on its luck. Her face, tinged with panic and guilt, looked up at me. She clutched at the hem of my clothing and said, "Sister Aurora, Brother Sebastian mentioned you. He told me how amazing you are. I just want to work with you. I don't have any other intentions." In my past life, I had believed her words. I brought Lillian into my department, assigned my most capable team members to guide her, and ensured she reported to me directly to fast-track her promotion. However, despite these efforts, Lillian showed no interest in improving herself. She barely tried. I sent her to Sebastian for his signature, and instead of working, she would spend the entire afternoon in his office. Once, when I walked in, I saw her massaging Sebastian's shoulders. "Sorry, Sister Aurora," she said sweetly. "I thought Brother Sebastian looked exhausted. I'll go back right away." But Sebastian waved her off, letting her stay, and then began nitpicking my work, clearly intending to humiliate me. That evening, while I worked late into the night, Lillian was seen in Sebastian's sports car, gazing at the starry ceiling. Now, with a second chance at life, I looked at Lillian again. Her slightly damp eyelashes hid a faint smirk of satisfaction. I smiled to myself. Sebastian always thought of her as a resilient yet delicate flower, unaware that she was merely a parasitic one, surviving only by clinging to someone powerful. "Congratulations, President Lillian, on your new role," I said. A smile flickered on her face before she quickly adopted an expression of surprise. "Sister Aurora, I'm not capable of such responsibility." Shaking my head, I replied, "I've already submitted my resignation to President Sebastian. My vacation starts next week, so time is short. Let's begin the handover this afternoon." The room fell silent. Lillian's expression turned sour, her fragility suddenly disappearing. After all, a parasitic flower can't bloom on its own. "Lillian, don't worry," Sebastian said, entering the room. He seemed weary, likely from arguing with the other executives. But upon seeing Lillian's distressed face, his exhaustion melted into concern. "Brother Sebastian, did I upset Sister Aurora? Is that why she wants to leave? I really admire her." Lillian's voice cracked as though she was about to cry, almost choked at her theatrics. But Sebastian, blind to her manipulations, said, Aurora, come to my office. Don't forget, I'm still your boss for now. I followed him into his office, already knowing their plan. The work was meant to be mine, while the credit would go to Lillian. As a respected figure in the industry, my accomplishments would elevate Lillian's image, making her seem even more exceptional. With me there, she didn't have to lift a finger. But there was one flaw in their scheme. Me. Do you have to be so stubborn, Aurora? Sebastian said. Just apologize to Lillian, and we can pretend the conference room incident never happened. He looked at me expectantly, convinced I would give in. Think about it. How many times have we argued? If it weren't for the fact that we grew up together, the Sebastian family would have dismissed you long ago, he added, as if granting me leniency. I stared at him silently. Was I really the unreasonable one in our arguments? Or was it the young president, struggling to assert authority in the 3 years since taking over? President Sebastian, if there's nothing else, I'll leave now. My decision won't change, I said firmly. In a fit of frustration, Sebastian knocked over a photo frame on his desk. The glass shattered, and inside was a picture of him, his father, and me from our high school graduation, a gift I had given him. The broken frame symbolized the end of our bond, one that had spanned 2 lifetimes. After a brief hesitation, I walked out without looking back. From that moment, a parade of senior executives took turns trying to persuade Sebastian to reverse Lillian's appointment. But this time, possibly out of anger toward me, Sebastian was immovable. He insisted on keeping Lillian as the new director of marketing. I completed my handover with her as quickly as possible. Lillian, distracted and inattentive, nodded blankly during my explanations. As soon as I finished, she rushed into Sebastian's office. Brother Sebastian, I'm worried I upset Sister Aurora. She spoke so quickly, I couldn't understand. Could you explain it to me again? She cooed. Once, as I passed by, I saw the two standing closely, their gazes lingering. The tension in the room hinted at an intimacy that was moments away. Smiling, I thought to myself, the deeper they sink into their love, the better my future plans will work. On my last day, the employees in my department cried as they bid me farewell. Hazel, my secretary of 4 years, hugged me tightly, smearing tears on my white suit. Sister Aurora, if you're leaving, take me with you, she begged. Hazel had grown from a timid graduate to a competent professional under my mentorship, and her loyalty touched me. But gently pushing her away, I said, survive in the Sebastian family for now. When the time comes, I'll return to take you with me. Startled, she nodded, her tear-streaked face finally showing some resolve. As I packed up my office, Hazel shouted, Rora, hurry up! Do you want President Lillian to wait for you? That day, I left under the watchful eyes of my colleagues. Aurora, who had dominated the industry for 8 years, disappeared. But I knew the real show was about to begin. As I exited the building, I crossed paths with Silas, the wealthiest man in the city. In my previous life, Lillian's encounter with Silas hadn't been my doing, though her silence had placed the blame on me. It was said that my decision to send her on a business trip had led to her meeting Silas, being forced to drink, and losing her innocence. In truth, I later learned from a subordinate that the high-end restaurant we visited during the trip had been chosen by Lillian. It was an extravagant place frequented by Silas. Our dinner had ended long before Lillian returned there for reasons unknown. At the time, I simply nodded, filing the information away. This time, I would ensure it didn't go to waste. One weekend, I decided to bring up the matter with Sebastian. I had intended to console him, to say that everyone has their own path in life, and that Lillian might now be living the life she had always dreamed of. However, Sebastian snapped at me instead. "Aurora, I never realized you were this malicious. She's just an innocent girl. What could she possibly be thinking? Don't try to justify yourself by projecting these baseless assumptions onto her." That's when I remembered that over the past couple of years, Sebastian had become someone who doubted everything I said. He would second-guess every suggestion I made at work. So naturally, he wouldn't believe me if I tried to expose Lillian's facade of purity. In this new life, I understood that honest advice, though well-intentioned, often went unheeded. Instead, I decided to let Lillian herself put on a show that Sebastian wouldn't be able to ignore. But I didn't do anything drastic. I simply sent an email under Lillian's name to Silas's secretary, proposing a business collaboration. Using material I had previously drafted, I pieced together a proposal. The key detail was the photo of Lillian I attached, carefully chosen by me. She looked delicate and charming, bearing a striking resemblance to Silas's ex-wife and other women he had dated over the years. This was the secret to how Lillian had climbed the social ladder in my past life, and now it became the invitation I extended to Silas in this one. True to his character, the city's wealthiest man, a sentimental yet shrewd individual, took the bait, rarely leaving Gangchang these days. Silas still made a point to step into the Sebastian family's headquarters. Even after enduring a completely off-track presentation by Lillian during the meeting, he remained composed. Without hesitation, he said, "Lily, a pet name he coined for her, did a great job. Let's invest 100 million first and see how it goes." Sebastian was thrilled by this unexpected windfall. He ended Lillian's internship prematurely and immediately signed her full-time contract, solidifying her role as director. That night, while relaxing in the bathtub, I received a message from Sebastian. "Rora, see? The world doesn't stop turning without you. It's even spinning better now." I smirked and switched off my phone. Just 10 minutes earlier, Hazel had messaged me. Silas's secretary had asked for Lillian's personal contact information. I could only imagine what was coming. Taking a sip of wine, I thought about Sebastian. How would he react when he realized his beloved, innocent little flower had climbed to a higher branch? In my previous life, after becoming pregnant, Lillian left Sebastian's company to live with Silas in Gangchang. Until her pregnancy was confirmed, however, she dutifully maintained her role at the Sebastian family's company, continuing to act like a naive and helpless girl. I recalled a time when an article about Lillian went viral. The headline read, Sebastian, president of the Sebastian family, sponsors a young female student for years. Photos revealed. One image showed Lillian as a new university student, while another captured her more recently, wearing a professional suit and standing confidently beside Sebastian. The comments were filled with admiration. They're such a great match. The little flower worked hard to stand beside the domineering CEO. President Sebastian must have great taste. This story is so inspiring. To be honest, Sebastian's supposed innocence didn't seem so believable 4 years ago when the story broke. At the time, I realized the Sebastian family had likely paid for this publicity as part of their end-of-year PR efforts. Surprisingly, the strategy worked. The CP character pairing of Sebastian and Lillian gained fans on Weibo, where they even created a trending topic. As the buzz grew, the Sebastian family's pre-sales for Double 11 skyrocketed, leading Sebastian to reward the PR department with generous bonuses. He even personally responded to the fans, writing, "Thank you all for your blessings. Lillian is a hardworking girl, and I'm still pursuing her." Fans went wild. "We're obsessed with this couple," they gushed. However, I later heard that Lillian had declined the PR team's suggestion to open her own Weibo account and interact with fans. She had simply replied, "I'm not good with words and wouldn't know how to respond appropriately. I have so much to learn. I don't deserve Brother Sebastian yet." At the time, I understood that she was waiting. The bigger fish hadn't taken the bait, and she didn't want to commit to Sebastian too early. Naturally, Sebastian reassured her, "No, Lillian, you're perfect just as you are. I can wait." Hazel later described the atmosphere between the two during a meeting as practically suffocating. However, for most employees, the romantic drama between the president and his little white flower was unbearable. One particularly drawn-out meeting, which involved 40 or 50 employees, lasted until 8 p.m., with stomachs growling and patience wearing thin. Though no one dared to voice their frustration, Hazel recorded every cringeworthy exchange in the meeting minutes, which she circulated the next day. The administrative staff had a field day reenacting the scenes while snacking on melon seeds. "Don't forget to give me that report this afternoon," one quipped, imitating Sebastian. Another replied in Lillian's voice, "I'm clumsy and not good at these things." Then came the punchline, "It's okay. I'll wait." When Lillian overheard them, her face froze. Furious, she confronted Hazel, only to be met with an innocent look. "President Lillian, didn't you say I should record every word in the meeting minutes?" Hazel asked sweetly. Lillian's eyes reddened with anger, but she couldn't argue. Those were her exact words. Lillian remembered every detail about Sebastian's preferences, including where he liked massages, but she consistently forgot critical work details. Once, when old Jiang sarcastically commented on her forgetfulness, she fled the meeting room in tears. Privately, she berated Hazel, asking, "Why didn't you write the minutes properly?" From then on, Hazel worked tirelessly, typing out even the most trivial interactions between Lillian and Sebastian. Once, she messaged me, joking, "I feel like I'm ghostwriting a cheesy CEO romance novel, sometimes even an R-rated one." On the day I left Gangchang, I unexpectedly ran into Sebastian. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit and looked down at me with condescension. "Aurora, are you taking a vacation or searching for a new job?" he asked smugly. Sebastian's confidence stemmed from his belief that no company in Gangchang would dare hire me due to the Sebastian family's influence. If I wanted to work elsewhere, I would have to leave the city in disgrace. "If you want to come back, just admit your mistake. I'll give you another chance," he said, even grabbing the boarding pass from my hand. "The scenery there is great for a vacation. Take another week off and then return to your position. What do you say?" Looking at the arrogant Sebastian, I felt a strange sense of detachment. Did he truly believe I was a lifeless doll he could control? Perhaps in my previous life, I would have bowed my head and obeyed, but not now. Taking back my boarding pass, I said, "President Sebastian, your joke is truly entertaining." With firm steps, I turned and walked away, Sebastian's furious voice trailing behind me. "Aurora, I hate you the most for being like this. Stubborn as a disgusting stone in a latrine," he shouted. "Oh, what's so bad about being a stone? The Monkey King was born from a rock, and without a stone, Dream of the Red Chamber wouldn't exist. I might have a fiery temper and an obstinate nature, but over the years, I've overcome countless challenges by gritting my teeth and forging ahead." While Sebastian had been spouting nonsense lately, this time, when he compared me to a stone, I found it oddly satisfying. I'd rather be a sturdy, dependable stone that makes a loud impact when it hits the ground than a delicate flower that wilts without support. I traveled to Ewing and, guided by memories from my previous life, checked into a small inn. The innkeeper, Edmund, was a painter who spent his days creating art in the courtyard. He was youthful, idealistic, and full of passion, just like I had been when I first joined the Sebastian family. With little else to do, I pulled up a stool and started chatting with him while basking in the sunlight. After several days of conversation, we grew close, and Edmund eventually learned about the absurd experiences I had endured in Gangchang. "That Sebastian guy must be an absolute fool," he exclaimed indignantly. "If I were him, I'd hand the company over to you, focus on my art, and let you handle everything. Life would be perfect." I chuckled and sipped the bitter tea he brewed. "If only," I replied, a faint trace of melancholy crossing my face. "But after 8 years of relentless work, I'm exhausted. Maybe it's time to retire gracefully." Edmund seemed like he wanted to persuade me otherwise, but after hesitating for a moment, he returned his focus to his drawing. I quietly enjoyed my tea, knowing the right moment was yet to come. Sure enough, 2 days later, news broke that the president of the Edmund family had embezzled funds and fled overseas. The following morning, while heading to the nearby breakfast shop, I bumped into Edmund leaving the inn. Gone were his casual clothes, He now wore a sharp shirt and tailored trousers. Attending a wedding? I asked, surprised. Edmund shook his head. No, just dealing with some family matters. He looked at me with a conflicted expression, as though he wanted to say something, but in the end, he stayed silent. Take care, I said with a nod, watching him leave. There was no rush. Everything was progressing as planned. During Edmund's absence, a headhunter I knew reached out. Did you interview with the Edmund family? They've been asking about you. I didn't respond, instead, continuing to soak up the sun in the courtyard. I wanted to let them investigate me on their own. When Edmund returned 3 days later, he looked as though he had just weathered a storm. His face was sharper, more determined, and his usual carefree demeanor was gone. Knocking on my door late in the evening, he said, Aurora, I have a proposal I'd like to discuss with you. The Sebastian and Edmund families shared many similarities. Both companies were comparable in scale, and both had lost their patriarchs within a year of each other. 3 years ago, while Sebastian rushed home after completing his postgraduate studies to take the reins of his family's empire, Edmund hired a professional manager and remained uninvolved in the business, focusing instead on his art. Many mocked him for neglecting such a lucrative opportunity, but I saw it differently. Edmund wasn't neglectful. He was pragmatic. Why give up his passion when he could delegate the responsibilities to capable hands? After being reborn, I saw Edmund as an ideal partner. I also recalled that in my past life, the Edmund family's president was embroiled in scandal shortly after Lillian entered the scene. Edmund would soon need a new leader, and I needed a position higher than director. That's why I chose this inn, so Edmund could get to know the Aurora who sipped tea in the sun and chatted with a young artist, not just the Aurora buried among piles of resumes. Now, Edmund asked earnestly, Aurora, what do you think? His composed expression betrayed a sheen of nervous sweat. He had made me a generous offer, but I stayed silent. I wanted him to value my decision. Sebastian had taught me that people don't treasure what comes too easily. I waited for Edmund to approach me a second time. This time I mentioned equity, requesting a substantial and risky percentage. I braced myself for resistance, expecting him to balk or accuse me of greed. To my surprise, Edmund agreed without hesitation. I'll consult the lawyer and prepare the contract, he said, before leaving with an almost puppy-like enthusiasm. I stood stunned. There had been no negotiation, just my unilateral gain. When we flew to Chang, I still felt like I was dreaming. Just a moment ago, it seemed, I had been trapped in that grimy, unfinished building. Now, as I signed the contract, I officially became the new president of the Edmund family. Edmund, watching from across the table, looked relieved. Years later, I asked him, why did you trust me so much back then? We'd only known each other a week. Without looking up from his canvas, he replied, Your 8 years at the Sebastian family proved your loyalty and capability. Appointing you president was the best decision I've ever made. Aurora, you're exceptional. Everyone sees it. Everyone except Sebastian. On my first official day as president, a trending topic about the Sebastian family caught my eye. This time, however, they were the subject of public ridicule. Their advertisements had taken a bizarre turn. One underwear ad read, "How can you compete with other women at work without wearing this?" A hotel ad featured a scantily clad woman smiling at the camera with the tagline, "You can meet your soulmate even in an inexpensive hotel." Another campaign for toiletries claimed, "Studies show women smell 3 times worse than men. Use this product to fix it." I couldn't stop laughing. 70% of the Sebastian family's customers were women, yet their campaigns were practically alienating them. It didn't surprise me, though. In my previous life, I had once assigned Lillian to work on similar projects, and the results were just as disastrous. She handed me her work, and for a moment, it felt as if the world had turned into one massive comedy show. I tried to offer constructive feedback. Our target consumers are women. Maybe try looking at this from their perspective, I suggested. Her response? She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes and asked, "Sister Aurora, am I really that stupid? I was worried you wouldn't like it, so I asked Brother Sebastian for feedback first. He didn't see any issues, so I went ahead and sent it to you." At that moment, I knew neither of them was fit for the job. Since Lillian was using Sebastian as her shield, I decided not to waste my time teaching her. I let her tears dry and dropped the matter. In this life, when Sebastian announced her promotion to Director of Marketing, I found it more amusing than frustrating. Sure, let her handle it, I thought. Unsurprisingly, her work became a fast track to disaster. Her marketing campaign landed the Sebastian family on the black hot search list. Outraged comments flooded in. Does the Sebastian family see us as customers or objects? In 2023, why are they still making ads pandering to the male gaze? I'll never buy Sebastian family products again. Even die-hard fans of the Sebastian Lillian CP couple pairing turned against them. I used to ship them, but now I want to gouge my eyes out, one said. The fallout was swift. The Sebastian family's stock plummeted, while many loyal customers began exploring alternatives. It didn't take long for people to rediscover the Edmund family's products. They were an established domestic brand, low-key, affordable, and effective. Comments shifted. I feel guilty. I always thought Trike XX was some low-quality brand, but it's from the Edmund family. Why didn't I know these great products were from Edmund? Edmund Group, please advertise more. Historically, the Edmund family hadn't prioritized marketing. The previous president, a science and engineering enthusiast, focused on research and development instead, investing heavily in patented technologies. I quickly reorganized the marketing department. We outlined product benefits, pricing, and target demographics, while responding to customer feedback on our official accounts with improvement plans. Our transparency and quality formed a sharp contrast with the Sebastian family's offensive advertising. Soon the stock prices of the two companies crossed paths. The Edmund family's shares surged, while Sebastian's continued their nosedive. Around this time, Lillian quietly quit her job. Sebastian, preoccupied with bad press, went to Lillian's office to comfort her, only to find it empty. On her desk was a resignation letter. "She's been leaving early lately," Hazel commented nonchalantly as she walked by. Hazel, who had resigned as well, hinted at Lillian's planned departure, but Sebastian didn't catch on. He assumed Lillian, his fragile flower, had left out of guilt. Rushing to the luxury flat he had bought for her, he found it completely vacant. Her phone was disconnected. Panicking, he reported her as missing, but the police dismissed his concerns. "Come back after 24 hours, they said. While Sebastian spent the critical 24 hours of the public relations crisis searching for Lillian, the Sebastian family's reputation crumbled further. 2 days later, he saw her again, not in person, but in the news. A Hong Kong headline read, "Silas returns with new companion. Suspected pregnancy." Lillian, wearing extravagant jewelry and holding the arm of the wealthy older man, beamed brightly. In my previous life, this incident had been downplayed. It was said that Lillian, while on a business trip, caught Silas's eye, got drunk, and lost her innocence. Rumors painted her as a victim, and Sebastian believed them. I had been scapegoated as the one who sent her on that trip. But this time, I had no involvement. Lillian had willingly abandoned the Sebastian family in its hour of need, throwing herself into Silas's arms. By the third day of the Sebastian family's PR disaster, the Edmund family had fully captured the public's attention. The Sebastian family's PR department, waiting for Sebastian to approve a response strategy, received only one word from him: "Whatever." He then disappeared to drown his sorrows at a bar. In novels, a CEO's heartbreak-fueled spiral might seem romantic, but in reality, Sebastian's absence during such a turbulent time only solidified his downfall. Meanwhile, I booked a flight to Gangchang, ready to reap the rewards of my efforts. "Sister, I missed you so much," Hazel cried as she clung to me, smearing tears and snot all over my clothes. She had climbed the ranks, now serving as the Edmund family's chief secretary. She no longer had to endure being a typing machine. Together, we attended meetings with former Sebastian suppliers, toasting and laughing as we secured partnerships. It was contract renewal season, and the contrast between the rising Edmund family and the crumbling Sebastian family was clear. Smart businesses knew where to place their bets. At a dinner one evening, I overheard a ridiculous tale. Sebastian chased Lillian to Gangchang, begging her to elope with him, someone said. But she shook him off, and Silas's bodyguards beat him half to death. Doesn't he know Silas built his empire through underworld connections? What was he thinking? The story didn't surprise me. Sebastian had always been sheltered by his father and me, leaving him with an inflated sense of self-importance. Yet I hadn't expected his drunken escapades to end at my doorstep. One night he appeared, bloodied and staggering. "Aurora," he said, his voice tender, a tone I hadn't heard in years. The last time he had called me Aurora with such sincerity was over a decade ago, before our relationship soured. Over time, he had turned me into his scapegoat, belittling and suppressing me. But now he stood before me, pleading, "Aurora, let's start over. I've realized you're the only one who was ever genuine with me." I couldn't help but laugh. Without a word, I turned away, trying to leave. But before I could take a step, he shoved me roughly against the wall. For a moment, darkness consumed me, and I was reminded of a haunting memory from my previous life, a memory steeped in the acrid smell of alcohol. My body began trembling uncontrollably as Sebastian kept speaking, seemingly oblivious to my fear. "Aurora, I was deceived by Lillian. I always thought she reminded me of the way you used to be, so I fell for her. But she's not you. She's just a gold digger. Aurora, come back to me, okay?" His voice cracked with desperation, his expression growing more animated with each word. Yet he failed to notice my panic-stricken face. Forcing myself to stay calm, I took deep breaths and reminded myself of the second chance I'd been given. Steeling my nerves, I raised my leg and kicked Sebastian hard in his most vulnerable spot. As he crumpled to the ground in pain, I spun around, unlocked the fingerprint door lock, and rushed inside. Sebastian was still calling my name, his voice brimming with misplaced affection. But his words were abruptly cut off when Edmund appeared, emerging from the bathroom in disheveled clothing. "Sister, why is there a mad dog barking at our door?" Edmund asked with a smirk, taking my hand, which Sebastian had pulled so tightly that it turned red. He blew on it gently and asked, "Does it hurt?" I shook my head. Sebastian, still clutching himself on the ground, stared at Edmund in shock before recognition dawned on his face. "Now I see why the Edmund family made you president, Aurora," he spat, his tone laced with fury and bitterness. "I was wrong about you. You and Lillian are exactly the same, using men and your bodies to climb the ladder." His voice dripped with both anger and a twisted satisfaction, as though he found solace in painting me as fallen. "President Sebastian," I replied coldly, "unlike you, I know how to separate work and personal matters." Edmund, resting his chin lazily on my shoulder, glanced at Sebastian as though he were an insect. "Actually, Sebastian, I owe you my thanks. If you hadn't let Aurora leave the Sebastian family so easily, I wouldn't have been able to persuade her to become president of the Edmund family." With that, Edmund shut the door and locked it, leaving Sebastian alone outside, defeated and despondent. I turned to Edmund, who was lounging on the sofa like a contented cat. "President Edmund, have you finished your art exhibition? When do you plan to return to Hangchang?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he propped his chin on one hand and looked at me playfully. Sister, I just helped you vent your anger. Don't you think I deserve some thanks first? Fine, I should thank you, I replied dryly. How about we offset your rent for staying here? Truthfully, there wasn't anything scandalous about Edmund staying with me. He had come to Juning for an art exhibition and disliked hotels, so he had chosen to stay at my house. It was mere coincidence that he encountered Sebastian, whom he loathed. Initially, I thought Edmund's presence was to supervise me as the largest shareholder in my new role as president. But to my surprise, he never once brought up work, unlike Sebastian, who had argued with me over every minor decision. Edmund's unshakable trust in me felt almost disorienting. Before leaving, he simply said, I just wanted to check on you. I don't understand the specifics of running a company. I only know that as long as you're doing well, everything else will fall into place, and I'll get more dividends next year. As he smiled in the pale winter sunlight, he added, Sister, we agreed I'd be a carefree tycoon, didn't we? For a fleeting moment amidst the cold, it felt as though I could hear the sound of ice and snow melting. In the following weeks, the dominoes of fate began to fall. The Edmund family opened a branch in Gangchang, and its market share and stock price steadily climbed. Meanwhile, the Sebastian family floundered. More than half their raw material suppliers severed ties, leaving them unable to meet production demands. Revenue plummeted, forcing them to downsize drastically. Sebastian seemed determined to weather the storm, but spring brought more misfortune. A car accident. Ironically, the date coincided with the day I had been forced to drink cheap liquor in that unfinished building in my previous life. This time, it was Sebastian who suffered. Both his legs were amputated, leaving him unable to care for himself. Sister Aurora, Sebastian called again. Hazel informed me one afternoon, her expression cautious. Ever since waking from surgery, Sebastian had been calling me daily, begging me to visit him in the hospital. He said he wants to apologize about something involving an unfinished building. Sister, do you know what he's talking about? For a moment, I was frozen. Memories of that dark, damp building flooded back, my hands and feet bound, my cries for help unheard. That horrifying ordeal had been orchestrated by Sebastian. How could I have forgotten? Could it be that he too had been reborn after his accident? Okay, I finally said. I'll go to the hospital. When I entered his hospital room, Sebastian sat by the window, staring at a blooming pear tree. The delicate white flowers swayed in the breeze. Spotting me, he turned and smiled faintly, his face weary. Aurora, look at those flowers. Don't they remind you of yourself? Pure, innocent, fragile, someone who needs my protection. I couldn't suppress my laughter. Perhaps once upon a time, I had looked up to him with admiration and gratitude. Back then, I was a young, naive Aurora with clumsy English, while he was the privileged heir who excelled at tennis and horseback riding. But those days were long gone. If I had remained a delicate flower, how would I have survived this far? If I had needed protection, who would have supported the young Sebastian as he secured his presidency? Sebastian, I'm no fragile flower, I said, my voice firm. I'm just a stubborn stone. Sebastian's eyes searched mine intently. Aurora, were you reborn too? Is that why you left the Sebastian family so decisively? Aurora, in our previous life, I didn't mean to kill you. I only wanted to scare you into admitting your mistake. It wasn't my intention for things to go so far. His voice cracked as he continued. It was those men. They went too far. I only wanted them to intimidate you, not to... He trailed off, unable to finish. But Sebastian, I interjected, my tone cold, you were the one who sent them. What exactly were your instructions? To tie me up and beat me, but stop short of killing me? To humiliate me, but only once or twice? Does it matter? If you hadn't arranged for them to find me, I wouldn't have ended up there at all. Sebastian's face turned ghostly pale. The room fell silent, the atmosphere heavy with regret and bitterness. After a long pause, he whispered, Aurora, it's my fault. It's taken me a lifetime to realize that you were the only person truly sincere to me. Please, give me a chance to make amends. I wiped away a stray tear and replied, there's no need. If you truly want to make things right, then atone for what you did to the Aurora from our past life. That night, I closed the chapter on Sebastian for good. As I pieced together the fragments of my memories, I began to understand the origins of Sebastian's growing resentment toward me. Perhaps it began in high school when I, once terrible at English pronunciation, unexpectedly scored the highest in the subject, the only one Sebastian excelled at. Or maybe it was during a summer break in college when I interned with the Sebastian family. Over dinner, I had an extended discussion with Sebastian's father about work, using technical terms that went over Sebastian's head. In frustration, he threw down his chopsticks and stormed out of the dining room. The divide between us deepened after he joined the company. Having spent 5 years navigating the corporate world, I had naturally gained more experience. Yet no matter how respectfully I offered suggestions, Sebastian always seemed to interpret my words as a show of superiority. To him, my confidence in my abilities was equivalent to mockery. It was as though he believed I was belittling him, the young president of the Sebastian family. His response was to undermine, criticize, and diminish me constantly. The rare moments when he seemed satisfied were only when I conceded and admitted fault, even when I wasn't wrong. There were countless moments like these, and though I couldn't recall every single one, they were enough to push Sebastian and me, once close in our teenage years, further and further apart. Eventually, I heard that Sebastian had managed to recover enough to get out of bed and use a wheelchair. He threw himself into an uphill battle to salvage the crumbling Sebastian family. In desperation, he even flew to Hong Kong to seek help from Lillian, hoping Silas might invest in the company. However, Lillian's priorities had changed. She was focused on her prenatal Pilates sessions. Though Sebastian pleaded repeatedly, she could only spare him time for a quick coffee. This time, Sebastian dared not anger the bodyguards shadowing her. He sat quietly, carefully presenting his proposal. Despite his best efforts, the result was still unfavorable. "Mr. Sebastian," Lillian said gently, stroking her growing belly, "I really can't help you. My husband has asked me to focus entirely on my pregnancy. Maybe you should find someone else, like Aurora." With that, she left her seat, barely warmed, remarking as she departed, "The coffee here is terrible. I'm never coming back." Ironically, later that same day, during a Pilates session, Lillian experienced severe bleeding, losing her baby. Tabloid reports claimed the ambulance was drenched in blood. Yet Silas, the man once known for his deep affections, visited her only once. Without the potential to bear him a child, Lillian's value diminished in his eyes. Soon Silas found a new lover, one who bore an even stronger resemblance to his late wife. Lillian was sent back to Zhangchang, and though she ceased working, she remained active in social circles, targeting wealthy men. However, when someone doesn't value themselves, it's unlikely others will either. Lillian's final misstep was pursuing a married businessman. When his wife discovered their affair, she publicly humiliated Lillian in a crowded mall. During a heated argument that followed, Lillian, pregnant again, suffered another miscarriage. As Hazel recounted these events to me, it all felt like a tale from another lifetime. Another urban legend soon surfaced: the mysterious disappearance of Sebastian. Some claimed he had put abortion pills in Lillian's coffee before their final meeting. It seemed his trip to Hong Kong had never been about securing Silas's investment. After leaving the cafe, Sebastian fled straight to the airport. Rumors suggested Silas's connections eventually caught up to him. Some said Sebastian was sold to Vietnam. Others claimed he was spotted at a tourist destination in Southeast Asia, physically disabled. While a small part of me felt pity, I wasn't deeply affected. Instead, I capitalized on the chaos. With the Sebastian family leaderless and their stock price at an all-time low, I presented the board with a meticulously prepared acquisition plan. Business demands bold, decisive moves, and I was prepared to make them. The day I returned to the Sebastian family as its new leader, the entire company lined the hallways in welcome. Everyone knew their turbulent days were over. After finalizing the acquisition, I checked my phone and reread a message Sebastian had sent me before his disappearance. "Aurora, I've repaid everything I owed you in our past life. No one taught me how to hate, so I believed I despised you. Later, I realized I was simply in love with you, a love that hurt. I missed you desperately when you were gone. I love you, Aurora." Reading his words, I took a long drag from my cigarette, sighed, and deleted the message. I didn't know how long Sebastian had survived after my death in the previous timeline, but his ability to rewrite the narrative remained unparalleled. The one who had humiliated and hated me now claimed to have settled his debts. Did he truly love me? Perhaps, but in the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was alive, thriving in the sunlight, holding the Sebastian family's future firmly in my hands. 2 years later, under my leadership, the Edmund family's profits had multiplied and our business ventures had diversified. After consulting with Edmund, we decided to rename the company to Juning Group. Edmund, now a celebrated artist, cared less and less about corporate affairs. Call it whatever you want, even Aurora Group. I trust your judgment, he said casually, polishing one of his trophies. As I worked late one evening, my gaze fell on that same trophy, displayed in the corner of a cabinet. Hazel's words from a few days earlier echoed in my mind. Sister Aurora, the girl in President Edmund's award-winning painting. It looks a lot like you. The painting, a girl crying by the sea, triggered a flood of memories. It was during my internship with the Sebastian family, after I had failed to secure a government project bid. Though countless factors influenced the decision, my 21-year-old self had stubbornly shouldered the blame. Why wasn't I good enough? I had thought. Why couldn't I do better for Sebastian's father? Blinded by tears, I hadn't noticed the rising tide until a passing boy grabbed my arm. What's so bad about being alive? Why look so defeated? He thought I intended to jump into the sea. Overwhelmed, I told him my story. He listened, then laughed. My family's in business too. I've heard plenty about people shirking blame, but never about someone so eager to claim it. If I had half your sense of responsibility, my father would be overjoyed. Why not come work for my family after graduation? Introduce a good employee to my father, and maybe he'll go easier on me. I laughed through my tears, unaware that this casual encounter would set the stage for a journey I never anticipated.